Hi, and welcome back. I woke up to an epic email from Andrew, surname withheld, this morning, on the subject of copyright. It's too long for me to read out in full, so I'll just stick to the list of questions at the bottom.
What is your opinion on digital music piracy? How do you think piracy affects musicians as a whole? Do you think that musicians should be compensated for the work that they put into creating their music? Given that you work with up-and-coming musicians, how do you think piracy affects those attempting to make a career out of music? How does music piracy affect your position as a music producer? Do you think music piracy affects your bottom line? Do you think listening to pirated music is as legitimate as listening to music through more conventional means? Is there a difference between listening to a pirated song versus streaming a song for free without ads? What is your opinion on music software piracy? Given the work you've done for a multitude of audio software companies, what is your opinion on people pirating from those companies due to your videos? Do you consider music made with pirated software to be legitimate? What is your opinion on digital rights management? Do you think copyright and intellectual property should exist?
Wow, where to start? Okay, let's zoom out and start with the big picture. I think it would be better for humanity as a whole if there were no copyright. Music improves our quality of life. I'm assuming everyone watching my channel agrees with that. So, if all the people had access to all the music, that would surely be a good thing. Likewise, software, whether it's for making music or anything else, if it enables us to do something that we couldn't do before, or to do it better or faster, then restricting its availability only holds us back as a species. But of course, there is a problem with this, as it's not compatible with human society as it currently functions. As we're talking about software, I'll use the analogy of an operating system and compare our current social structures to Windows 95. From a distance, it might look like we have a sophisticated hive mind operating system that allows us to cooperate like ants to build huge cities and vast civilizations. But drill down to the individual level, and you'll find that this is just a superficial top layer, and underneath we're still running the monkey-simian dirty operating system. We're actually fiercely individual, territorial, and acutely conscious of social status and hierarchy. And we've had to develop a complex code of ethics and morality to allow the pseudo-hive mind of civilization to sit, slightly uncomfortably and uneasily, on top of those more ancient and primitive instincts that we inherited from our ape-like ancestors. And inherent to this system is the idea that if you don't earn money, you're not a valid part of society. That you should, at best, be grateful for whatever charity is offered you, or at worst, just be allowed to starve. In such a society, anyone who wishes to create content full-time, and let's face it, that's usually what you need to do to get really good at it, is going to have to find a way to monetize that content. And of course, digital rights management, copy protection, and so on all flow from that basic requirement. Charging money for that content inevitably involves denying that content to people who haven't paid. So as it stands, a full-time creator that fails to monetize their work will be destitute. And as long as our society is configured this way, I believe creators have the right to demand remuneration for their work. Andrew's email suggests that there are artists who have embraced piracy and encourage it. But I take issue with that slightly. If the works are being distributed with their creator's blessing, then it's not piracy. It's only piracy when you don't have the creator's blessing. And in that case, I regard it as theft. Now, of course, that complex moral code we use to interface our individual monkey brains with the hive mind of our civilization allows for some nuance on the subject of theft. Stealing a handbag from a pensioner is not the same as stealing a loaf of bread because you're starving. You might think you're justified in pirating a plugin if you really can't afford to buy it, and if the developer of that plugin is happily buying himself fancy cars. You'll have to square that with your own conscience. But don't kid yourself that it's not stealing. On the specific issue of software, there is another aspect that's not often discussed. Users of pirated software don't normally get to report bugs or request features. And that type of feedback is an important part of making the software better. So piracy probably has a negative effect on the quality of the software we're all using. If a software developer chooses to protect their work with an iLock, for example, that's their right to do so. If you don't like it, blame the pirates, not the developers. If a software developer designed a hardware dongle that pricked your finger and tested your DNA before allowing you into the app, that's their right to do so, and your only recourse would be to not use the software. But let's assume we agree that none of this is ultimately desirable, that the world would be a better place if all music were free and all software open source. What would we need to change to make that possible? Of course, first of all, we need a way to ensure that you can create content full-time without being left destitute. And I think that's probably on the way already. It's widely anticipated that automation is going to replace many jobs over the next few years. And that's not just driving jobs being replaced by self-driving vehicles, but also lawyers and accountants being replaced by machine-learned algorithms. And I think some type of universal basic income is inevitable sooner or later. If you're writing me off as a communist now, don't. Partly because UBI doesn't only have support on the left. Many on the right of politics also see it as inevitable if we're to avoid a total collapse in society. But also because of the next point I'm going to make. We're not all equal, and there's no point pretending that we are. We live in a hierarchical society, and awareness of one another's social status is hardwired into our monkey brains. I don't believe it's possible to change that simply by deciding to. This brings us to the next problem, money, which performs two quite different functions. Most obviously, money is the method we use to ration the available resources. But it's also, simultaneously, the primary metric we use to measure social status. That's what leaves us in the crazy position of watching two billionaires have a pissing contest over who can get further into space, while half the planet still doesn't have enough to eat. If we look to nature, we can find many other examples of animals that compete with one another for territory or mating rights, and often they have evolved, ritualized alternatives to combat that reduce or eliminate the risks of real injury. Perhaps they lock horns in a ritual test of strength, and the loser accepts his defeat and retreats. Or perhaps they literally just go by who can piss higher up a tree. I think humanity needs to evolve an alternative way to denote status, one that's less harmful than hoarding wealth. Some kind of intellectual currency, perhaps, to go with our concept of intellectual property. And actually, I think social media represents a fledgling attempt to do so. A large social media following is beginning to convey status and influence in much the same way as pecuniary wealth has done traditionally. And I think that's probably a good thing. So here's the TLDR answer to at least some of Andrew's questions. The basic requirements to make all content free are, first, a universal basic income, so that creating content doesn't mean risking hunger and homelessness. And second, a way to satisfy the deeply human urge to gain social status, without that necessarily meaning amassing personal wealth. Until we've reconfigured society in those ways, you should continue to pay for your music and software. And don't complain about the DRM, because creators have bills to pay and mortgages just like everyone else. And if everyone pirated, there wouldn't be much music or software to pirate. Feel free to call me a communist in the comments. I'm a big boy, I can take it. Thanks for watching.